The island that breaks men. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you can handle the truth, because once you step inside this story, there's no turning back. The body was found just before dawn, floating near the eastern edge of Rikers Island, tangled in debris where the East River churns against concrete. A corrections officer spotted it during a routine perimeter check, the gray light revealing a man face down in the water, wrists marked with deep purple bruises. By the time NYPD Harbor Unit pulled him out, it was already clear. This wasn't an accident, and it didn't start in the river. His name was Marcus Reed, 26 years old. Arrested 3 weeks earlier on a misdemeanor weapons possession charge. No conviction. No trial. Just another detainee waiting for his day in court. Inside Rikers, word spread faster than any official report. In the housing units, men whispered Marcus's name like a warning. Some said he owed money. Others said he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. A few claimed he'd been targeted the moment he arrived. Too quiet, too scared, too alone. Detective Laura McKenna arrived on the island as the sun rose higher, burning through the fog. She'd worked homicides across all 5 boroughs, but Rikers was different. The moment she stepped through the gates, the air felt heavier, charged with tension and old anger. Razor wire shimmered overhead. Sirens echoed in the distance. Somewhere inside, someone was screaming. Marcus's intake file painted a familiar picture. No violent history. Part-time warehouse worker. Supporting a younger sister. Picked up during a traffic stop when police found an unregistered handgun in the glove compartment. He couldn't afford bail. So he waited. And waited. McKenna spoke to detainees who'd been housed near Marcus. Most refused to talk. A few laughed nervously. One man, eyes darting toward the cameras, finally whispered, "Rikers doesn't need killers. It makes them." Then there was Officer Daniel Cruz, a veteran corrections officer who'd been on duty the night Marcus disappeared. Cruz claimed nothing unusual happened. Count was normal. No fights reported. No medical emergencies. But McKenna noticed something off. Cruz kept rubbing his wrist, his voice tightening whenever Marcus's name came up. Security footage became the next battleground. Cameras inside Rikers were notorious. Blind spots, broken angles, entire hours missing due to maintenance issues. Still, investigators managed to piece together fragments. Marcus was seen leaving his housing unit just after midnight, escorted by 2 officers toward a service corridor not typically used for detainee movement. According to logs, that corridor led to a holding area near the intake tunnels, close to the island's edge. McKenna requested internal reports. What she got instead was resistance. Delays. Redacted pages. A quiet suggestion from a supervisor to let internal affairs handle it. It was clear the department wanted this contained. Outside the walls, Marcus's sister, Alana Reed, stood in the cold holding a photo of her brother, demanding answers. "He went in alive," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't get to give him back like this." As pressure mounted, another detail surfaced. Marcus had filed a written complaint 2 days before his death, alleging repeated threats from other detainees, and warning that officers were setting him up by moving him between units at odd hours. The complaint was stamped received. No follow-up documented. Late that night, McKenna returned to the footage one last time. Frame by frame. Timestamp by timestamp. And that's when she saw it, an image so brief it almost slipped by. Marcus, handcuffed, turning his head toward the camera as he was led down the corridor. His mouth was open, frozen mid-word. Zoomed in, enhanced, barely legible, but unmistakable. He was trying to say one word. Help. And when investigators finally traced where that corridor ended, behind a locked, off-books maintenance door near the river, they realized Marcus Reed was never meant to leave Rikers Island alive. The system closes in. The maintenance door hadn't been opened in months. When investigators finally forced it wide, the smell hit first, stagnant water, rust, and something faintly metallic that lingered in the back of the throat. Beyond it stretched a narrow concrete passage sloping downward toward the river, its walls scraped and scarred, as if something heavy had been dragged through more than once. This was where Marcus Reed had vanished from the official record. Detective McKenna stood at the threshold, flashlight cutting through the darkness. She could already see the marks, boot scuffs overlapping, handprints smeared low along the wall, and thin streaks that forensics later confirmed were diluted blood. Not enough to cause death on their own. Enough to prove a struggle. The theory forming in McKenna's mind was simple and terrifying. Marcus hadn't escaped. He'd been moved. Quietly. Deliberately. And whoever did it knew exactly which cameras didn't work. Inside Rikers, the mood shifted. The death in the river wasn't just another rumor anymore, it was a message. Detainees began refusing transfers. Fights broke out during count. One housing unit was locked down after a man slashed his own arm just to get sent to medical, away from the tears. "Anywhere but here," he kept saying. Officer Daniel Cruz stopped showing up for work 3 days after Marcus's body was identified. Sick leave, according to records. But McKenna learned through a union source that Cruz had requested a transfer weeks earlier, citing unsafe conditions and pressure from supervisors. Requests denied. When Internal Affairs finally agreed to sit in on interviews, the room felt crowded and hostile. Questions were deflected. Language turned bureaucratic. Marcus Reed became the decedent. His death, an ongoing review. McKenna pressed harder, asking about unlogged detainee movements, about missing footage, about officers working overtime on the night Marcus disappeared. That's when the first piece of evidence went missing. Marcus's handwritten complaint, his warning, vanished from the intake archive. The digital scan was corrupted. The physical copy, unaccounted for. Someone had reached inside the system and erased it. Outside, Alana Reed received a call from a blocked number. The voice was calm, almost sympathetic. "Stop talking to police," it said. "Your brother's gone. Don't make it worse." She reported it immediately. McKenna listened to the voicemail replayed through a tinny speaker, her jaw tightening. This wasn't damage control anymore. It was intimidation. Then came the witness. A detainee named Luis Navarro agreed to talk after being placed in protective custody. He was thin, shaking, his eyes permanently fixed on the door. Navarro claimed he'd seen Marcus the night he disappeared, seen officers pull him aside during count, seen him resisting as they led him toward the service corridor. "They said he was being moved," Navarro whispered. "But nobody moves at that hour. Not like that." Navarro also said something else, something far worse. He claimed Marcus had been paying officers for protection after refusing to smuggle contraband between units. When Marcus tried to back out, the threats started. "They told him Rikers would eat him alive," Navarro said. Turns out they were right. Before McKenna could arrange a follow-up interview, Navarro was transferred without notice. His new location was listed incorrectly. By the time the error was discovered, he was gone, released early on a paperwork technicality no one could explain. McKenna felt the clock ticking louder now. Witnesses were disappearing. Evidence was dissolving. And the deeper she dug, the more resistance she faced, not just from corrections, but from her own department. Late one night, reviewing call logs, she noticed something that stopped her cold. Officer Cruz's phone had pinged a tower near Rikers at 2:17 a.m. the night Marcus vanished, long after Cruz claimed he'd gone home. Minutes later, the same phone pinged near the river. McKenna drove back to the island alone. Standing near the water's edge, she stared at the dark current where Marcus had been found. That's when she saw it, etched faintly into the concrete barrier, almost worn away. 3 letters. Crude. Desperate. DOC. Department of Correction. Marcus Reed hadn't just been killed. He'd been trying to tell them who did it. And whoever was responsible was still inside Rikers Island, watching, waiting, and making sure no one else ever spoke again. The island answers back. The arrest came quietly, without cameras or press releases. Officer Daniel Cruz was taken into custody just after midnight, escorted from his apartment in Queens while neighbors slept. Officially, it was for questioning related to falsified time logs. Unofficially, everyone involved knew it was the first crack in a wall that had stood for decades. Cruz didn't speak at first. He sat across from Detective McKenna in a small interrogation room, hands folded, eyes hollow. When confronted with the phone pings, the corridor footage, and the blood traces near the maintenance tunnel, his jaw clenched. He still said nothing. What broke him wasn't evidence. It was guilt. "They told me it was routine," Cruz finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They said he was causing problems. Said if we didn't handle it, someone else would, and it'd be worse." According to Cruz, Marcus Reed had become a liability. He refused to carry contraband. He filed complaints. He asked too many questions about why detainees were being moved and who was getting paid. Supervisors labeled him unmanageable. The order came down disguised as discretion. Move him, scare him, make him fall in line. But the night they took Marcus through the service corridor, something went wrong. "He fought," Cruz said. "Not like he thought he'd win. Like he knew it was over." Marcus had been dragged into the maintenance passage, out of sight of working cameras. A struggle followed. Someone struck him, harder than intended. Panic set in. Calling medical would mean reports, investigations, exposure. So they made a decision that couldn't be undone. They left him by the water. Cruz claimed Marcus was still breathing when they walked away. The revelation detonated inside the department. Internal Affairs widened the investigation. 2 supervisors were suspended. Another officer resigned before charges could be filed. Paper trails surfaced, overtime approvals tied to specific detainee movements, complaints quietly closed without review, maintenance logs altered to erase activity near the river. But the system fought back. A grand jury indicted Cruz on manslaughter and official misconduct. The supervisors faced administrative penalties, not criminal charges. Prosecutors cited insufficient evidence for anything more. Rikers Island, as an institution, remained untouched. Alana Reed sat through every hearing. She listened as lawyers debated procedure and liability, as her brother's life was reduced to timelines and technicalities. When the verdict came, guilty on lesser charges, she didn't cry. She stared straight ahead, gripping Marcus's photo until her hands shook. Outside the courthouse, she spoke only once. "They want one man to carry the weight of a machine," she said. "But machines don't stop unless you shut them down." Months later, McKenna requested a transfer. She'd solved the case, but it didn't feel like justice. The tunnel near the river was sealed off with fresh concrete. The graffiti scrubbed clean. New cameras installed. Official statements promised reform. Inside Rikers, the violence didn't stop. It adapted. 3 months after Cruz's conviction, another detainee was found injured near the same perimeter, alive, barely. He told medics he'd slipped. His file showed he'd filed a complaint 2 days earlier. The complaint was never logged. Late one evening, McKenna received an unmarked envelope at her new precinct. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no return address. Just a name she recognized immediately. Another detainee. Another minor charge. Another man waiting for trial. Scrawled beneath it were 3 familiar letters. DOC. Rikers Island was still standing. And somewhere inside its walls, the system was choosing its next victim. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Make sure you're subscribed, because the truth doesn't stay buried for long.